Hello, sports fans.
And non-sports fans.
Yeah, we're not actually sports fans at the moment because our team sucks. So
Yeah.
we don't have to talk about sports.
Luckily, we aren't.
No, actually, we are here to talk about the British royal family, which is always a staple. And
Always a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure because it's always the gift that keeps on giving.
Yes.
In terms of drama.
Yes, and in terms of glamour, in terms of nostalgia for us.
Yes.
As American women.
Fashion.
Nothing screams nostalgia like the British royal family for me.
Take me back. Take me back to 1775. We want to go back. Make America British again.
But
for real, when we were gone on our hiatus, there was quite a lot happening with the royal family that we want to go back and cover. Not just because it was juicy and sad, but
yeah, sicko.
Yeah, well, I'll talk about the guilt that I had and most of people online had throughout that process, but also because it does, tie in to what we talk about here, which is the brain. Mm-hmm. So we're going to tie it all together.
Sure does. It all comes back to that beautiful brain.
Well, that beautiful brain of ours. But we're talking about Kate's brain, Princess Kate's brain today. And actually, apparently, if you believe the stories and the tabloids, she actually prefers to be called Princess Catherine and not Kate. And the fact that Meghan and Harry call her Kate is something that she's offended by because she herself refers to herself as Princess Catherine. So I'm conflicted. What do we do?
Yeah, I think that makes sense because we were all introduced to Kate, of course, when she was just a mere college student dating Prince William.
She was a mere Kate Middleton.
She was just Kate Middleton. And now she, is a princess. She's also grown up. Like, people grow out of their childhood, like, nicknames, right? And they want to go by their full name. Also, if I were a princess, I would absolutely use the term princess with my name at all times.
A full name.
Yeah. But I'm still going to call her Kate.
I think for the purposes of this podcast, because people are familiar with her as Kate, we'll call her Kate, right?
I also consider myself a friend of. So,
yes, that's true. So
I grew up with her.
Yeah, you've earned that right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, meaning no disrespect to Princess Catherine, we're going to continue to call her Kate. And yes, so unless you lived under a rock at any point this year, and actually this was at a time where you were like giving birth or in labor or very pregnant, so there were a lot of things that I actually had to fill you in on. It was
but I still would say that I was aware.
You were aware. Yeah.
I actually got a tip from inside the media world that Kate was going to make her first announcement 10 minutes before it happened.
Yes, you did. You did
I really actually was. I was in the loop, I would say.
So stay tuned for future hard-hitting news from Riley's news sources.
Yeah, I will
Most
not reveal
likely when it
them.
comes to Housewives and Bravo.
Or, news.
Or news. Hey, that's news. Anyway, so we'll start in January of this year, the year 2024. And Kate, she has surgery for what they referred to as routine abdominal surgery at the time. And then she kind of disappears. So she goes underground to recover. But there's not a lot of explanation as to what the surgery is for. And by explanation, I mean to the public, who is always very curious. And especially if you're from the UK, you feel like you are owed an explanation because that is your royal family. And I feel like I'm owed an explanation because I put so much of my time in following what they do.
Correct.
So, routine abdominal surgery, it's kind of vague, not really sure what that means and why it would cause you to kind of completely disappear from public life. And so this creates suspicion among people and rumors, what's going on. So the royal family decides to release a picture of Kate with her children on Instagram and Twitter. And this picture turns out to be photoshopped. So as you can imagine, and it was confirmed photoshopped. It wasn't at this point like the royal family came out and said, or Kate came out in a statement and said, I'm an amateur photographer and I've been dabbling in Photoshop. So
through a statement. So we don't really know if that was her, by the way.
Right, correct. So not only are people like, okay, so you photoshopped this photo that's not real. Now you've made her put out a statement throwing herself under the bus. So now we get all of these conspiracy theories. How sick is she really? Is she even alive? That was a big contender for what people thought was going on, that she wasn't
did she
alive.
get like a facelift was
that she had,
another popular
facelift.
one. She couldn't be seen.
Is she being held against her will?
Is she
and
like
so
leaving William and
is she leaving
public
William
life altogether?
The cheating rumors that have plagued William throughout his life came back. I mean, everything. It was everywhere. And are they using a doppelganger? Are they using a stand-in? Because there were some like grainy photos of her in the car, her out, and that didn't really look like her, but could have been her. And so, what we saw during this time was typical of the royal family, which was you don't comment publicly on what's going on. So even about your own family members to defend them. So all of these things are in the tabloids, online. They don't say anything. This is one of Prince Harry's biggest criticisms of his family and the royals, and why he decided to leave his duties, because he always claims that his family refused to defend Meghan publicly when there was some really horrible hate being spread about her. So again, we see this. Then on top of that, King Charles announces his cancer diagnosis in February. So he comes out and says, I've been diagnosed with cancer, does not specify what type, does not specify how serious it is, anything else. So again, very secret.
And things move so quickly that already we kind of forget how big of a deal this was. But in February, when we had no idea where Kate was, there were rumors like she doesn't want to do this anymore, like she's out. And then we have the king undergoing cancer treatment. I literally thought, and I don't think I was alone, I was like, this is the end of the British monarchy. Like, it's over.
It was so, once again, so poorly handled in my estimation, and most people.
I was like, mom talk cannot survive this.
Mom talk cannot survive.
They just can't.
And like Mom Talk, it survived somehow. Because in March, Kate releases a video of herself and reveals that she's been receiving chemotherapy. So she had her surgery in January, it wasn't because of cancer that she had the surgery, but they found some type of evidence that cancer was present during the tests that she had. So they decided she would undergo preventative chemo. So I immediately was like, well, I'm just a horrible person because I just spent months of my life consumed in all these conspiracy theories, convinced that everything else but that was going on.
And we didn't discuss the conspiracies on the podcast, did we, at the time? Because
No.
I have this like memory of specifically you being very flippant about where Kate was, but I'm pretty sure that that is an actual podcast of someone else that I listened to, and they apologized for it. But I did want to make sure that we didn't need to do any apologies.
No, we
It's
didn't
been a
have
minute
any
since we've
episodes.
done an apology tour.
Yes, we thankfully, I need to do an apology tour for the thousands of texts that I have, but thankfully, yeah, no one outside of those texts is reading them.
All right, good.
I don't remember. Explain how I was flippant.
No, you weren't. That's what I'm saying.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
I have this fear that that happened on our podcast, but I know that that happened on a different podcast. So I think in my head, like so we're good.
I
to apologize for.
I was of the camp, I think at first, that she was probably really sick, but wasn't sure what it was. But I will say that I started to be very convinced by the rumors of her wanting to walk away, and issues with William, because I still think that is something, his alleged affair. We may never know, just like
Well,
with
especially
his father.
because I think that her being out of the public eye actually brought those rumors that like people who follow the royal family more closely were familiar with, but it kind of catapulted it into the broader public sphere. So then everyone was like talking about these rumors that probably never would have if not for the poor handling of the situation.
Once again, they did themselves a disservice. I don't know who their PR people are for decades. Just hire me and I could probably handle these crises.
Yeah.
Just a little bit better.
I mean, I would say list of worst crises PR teams. Number 1 would be the British royal family. Number 2, whoever Armie Hammer had.
Oh God.
And number 3, probably Diddy's person at the moment.
Well, I don't think he has a PR person. No one's defending him.
No, he does, because the PR person said that, or maybe it was his lawyer who said that the baby oil is just economical to buy in
from Costco. Yeah,
the quantity that he did. Yeah. So that's bad as well.
And Costco came
but
out.
At least he addressed it.
Yeah, Costco addressed it.
Costco got ahead of the controversy.
They said
they
no,
hire Costco's team.
Not on our name. Immediately squash that theory. Yeah. So if Costco can do it, the British royal family could do it. I mean, honestly. 100%. Last month, Kate, I think it was last month, that this video came out that Kate announced that she had completed her treatment. And what I immediately noticed from this video was, so it's her and William and the kids. The one announcing that she was getting treatment was just her, which people had a lot of criticisms about, like, why isn't he there supporting her? Why is it just her? I don't really have any opinions on that. He doesn't need to be in everything that she's in. But maybe because there were so many rumors about their marriage, maybe it would have been good for him to be there, just not say anything and just sit there. But this video was like, the PR team got the message because it was the whole family. I don't think I've ever seen them so like intimate and exposed as a family, and the kids, and just talking about her journey and, her gratefulness. So it was nice to see, but the cynical side of me is like, okay, this was many months too late. And I don't know if I believe it, but of course we are very happy to hear that her treatment was successful. And we're going to talk about the, potential effects of chemotherapy physically and mentally. And so I can certainly understand why she wanted some private time. don't blame her for that. It's just,
Yeah.
again, the way everything was handled.
Yes. We thought that it was a good idea to do this episode, not only because, it was something that a lot of people were talking about that we haven't addressed in the podcast, but also I think it is a great opportunity to talk about some mental health issues, and then also another area of neurobiology that maybe people aren't familiar with. So yes, Kate has said that her treatment involved preventative chemotherapy. I think that's a term that like a lot of people hear associated with cancer, but might not know what it is. So just to make sure we're kind of all starting from the same place, chemotherapy is either like a single or a combination of drugs that are used to kill cancer cells. And they do that by selectively targeting rapidly dividing cells, because a cancer cell is inherently rapidly dividing. That's why you end up with tumors, because they're just constantly growing. In contrast to other methods of cancer treatment like radiation, chemotherapy is usually not targeted just to the area where there's a tumor. So typically the chemo drugs are given by IV or sometimes by pill or even injection. This means that the entire body is exposed to the chemo, which is why people lose hair. Hair follicles are extremely rapidly dividing cells, so they are affected by the chemotherapy and you get the hair loss. So that there's naturally going to be a lot of off-target effects because your whole body is receiving them. And one of those effects is related to the brain. It's known technically as chemotherapy-related cognitive impairment, but most typically you'll hear it referred to as chemo fog or chemo brain. And that's usually seen as changes in your memory, changes with speech and like word recall, and then ability to learn new tasks. But you can also see difficulties with planning, attention, or interestingly, like visual spatial reasoning and learning can also be affected. I was surprised to learn that this is extremely common. So it's estimated that 70% of patients undergoing chemotherapy will experience chemo fog, chemo brain. And then up to 50% have long-term effects of their cognition after chemotherapy, which is really sad to think about. And your risk and the extent of these impairments is modified by different things like your age when you start treatment, or if you had, any cognitive impairments before starting. So we can guess, Kate's pretty young and her faculties seem to be in order before, so that will obviously offset some of the symptoms that she could experience. Why does chemo affect the brain in this way? It's not because the drugs are getting directly into the brain. So we have that blood-brain barrier we've talked about before that can keep things in and let what needs to go in into the brain. But chemotherapy drugs are just too big. They're not going to cross into the blood-brain barrier, which is good. Like, we don't want them acting on brain cells. However, we still see all of these cognitive changes. There seem to be a lot of biological mechanisms driving chemo fog. And that can be the increased inflammation. We just talked in our previous episode about meningitis and how when immune cells come into the meninges, that can have effects on the brain. So a similar thing happening here. Chemotherapy also generates a lot of free radicals, which put stress on cells. And interestingly, there are certain regions of the brain that are able to create new neurons in adulthood. Typically, like, you don't make new brain cells or neurons, but there are some areas where that can happen. And after chemotherapy, we see that the generation of new neurons is slowed. Overall, you can see structural changes in the brain. So the blood-brain barrier does become more able for things to get through. You see that gray matter, so neuronal density in certain areas decreases. Your white matter, which is that the myelin that allows neurons to communicate efficiently, that can be impaired after chemotherapy. There's changes in connectivity and in the ways that different brain regions signal to one another. And then you also see at a cellular level that the structure of individual neurons changes. They become less branched out. So all of these contribute to the symptoms you see in chemo brain. And having that decreased cognitive capacity in itself can lead to depression or anxiety. But having cancer in general does cause depression and anxiety. Obviously, there's changes in the way you're feeling, there's facing your mortality, there's financial pressures, logistical concerns of getting to different appointments, managing all of the medications and treatments you need to do. So it's about 20% of cancer patients meet the criteria for depression and 30% for anxiety.
That's lower than I thought it would be.
Yeah. I think probably because of like the duration that's needed to meet like these certain diagnoses. Yeah, it's probably the diagnostic criteria. I would also guess that this is probably underestimated if sometimes with like comorbidities. So having the cancer diagnosis and someone being able to say like, okay, they're undergoing chemotherapy right now, like that might be driving it. So it's just the way it's measured. But it also doesn't stop at just the patient. You know, you mentioned William and seeing the children in this new video. So I also wanted to note like that a cancer diagnosis affects everyone in the family, all the caregivers. And interestingly, you know, the estimate that I gave you was 20% of cancer patients meeting the diagnostic criteria for depression, but a 2022 study that analyzed over 35 different papers that looked at the mental health of loved ones of cancer patients found 40% of caregivers struggled with depression. And this also involves children. Depression and anxiety look different in children. They don't necessarily have the same tools to express their emotions. So in children, you can see acting out, like behavioral changes, changes in sleep. And all of this just puts so much stress on the family unit. And then you add like the public pressure of all of the rumors that William and Kate were going through. I was interested in data on how a cancer diagnosis can affect marriage outcomes, just out of curiosity. And I found that if you look, this is based on like a study, I think from like the 2010s, and it went like super viral. So people may have heard of this, but they found that overall, if you look at couples where one of them received a cancer diagnosis versus the broader population, there's no increase in risk of divorce. However, when you look by the sex of the person diagnosed, so whether it was the husband or the wife, men are actually less likely to get divorced than the rest of the population when they are diagnosed with cancer. However, when a woman's diagnosed with cancer, she's 2 times as likely to get a divorce.
Well, I have some theories on that may not be popular for our male listeners.
Men do better. Hopefully, thankfully, it seems like William and Kate are at least sticking it out for appearances. But it makes sense why she wanted and needed privacy and time, because it's not even just about her and her health. It is about her marriage, her children, her entire family unit undergoing this change. And
of course, we have no idea what it was really like for her. In her statements and in the video that she released, it didn't really go into specifics about what it was like for her day to day. But And I think that there are a lot of people that saw her in that video and then saw her in her recent appearances, where they saw like a beautiful woman with
Mm-hmm.
like beautiful hair. She looked healthy. She didn't look different than before.
Mm-hmm.
So, you still have those people that don't, that maybe are still a little suspicious of what was happening. But I mean, again, we don't know what type of cancer, we don't know how much chemotherapy and how often, we don't know those details, and it affects
Mm-hmm.
everyone differently. But I think what we're saying here is no matter the extent of what she had, eh, coupled what she was going through, coupled with the role that she plays in the public and the things that were being said, and her emphasis on protecting her family, especially her
Mm-hmm.
children, all of that had to have kind of snowballed into a mental state that I can't imagine was
Yep.
um, one that you would want to be in when you are going through that type of treatment.
100%. And then you consider the fact, like, it's almost weird to me how the king's cancer has been
Mhm.
like less of a story than
Right,
Kate's, and like less of a thing that the public is concerned about. But like, you had both of these happening simultaneously, so that's double the stress.
right.
And for you know the children of Charles as well as his grandchildren. It was a heavy, heavy time for
Right.
them without the public scrutiny.
Yeah. Because I mean, reportedly, Kate and Charles have a close relationship. So
Hmm.
that was something else that she had to worry about. I mean, we could theorize why the public didn't react the same. One, I think it's his age. He's older.
Yeah,
So
sure.
that's news that you're more accustomed to hearing at his age. And then two, he's not nearly as popular.
Yeah.
Um, so
But in terms of like his ability to fulfill his duties, I mean, we've seen him delegating more, and even
right.
like bringing in other members of the royal family as now working royal members of the royal family. But yeah, we have no information really about what treatment he's undergoing, but you can
No.
imagine the psychological, cognitive, and like emotional toll of everything that he's experiencing definitely is going to
Yeah.
affect his ability to lead.
Yeah. Exactly. And no matter what we think of as a person, obviously we sympathize with whatever he is going through. And that, no, we don't.
I don't know why you said we. Like,
What?
you made me sound like I just hate this man and want
We
him to
don't.
suffer.
No, we don't want to suffer. That's my point. Like,
Yeah.
we don't. We aren't huge fans of him historically as a person.
I just feel like since he's gotten older, it's just like I just view him less of an irritant
I mean,
until
that's true. I honestly don't think of him, which is
I don't. Yeah,
which is
that's
another thing about why maybe it wasn't a big deal, because people don't think about him.
yeah. It just feels like we're just waiting for William to take the throne, and
Well,
right
we've
now
been
it's just
waiting. Yeah,
like an intermission. Um,
a juggling
dang,
act.
I'm gonna have to apologize for this one.
I know. There's apology tour. Here we go.
Yeah,
It was only
I
a matter of
gotta.
time. Just to close out, I wanted to check in on if you have had any differing opinion about Meghan and Harry since our hiatus. There hasn't been anything like huge going on about them with the whole Kate
Um, yeah,
drama,
I
but
definitely felt more sympathy for them than I had been feeling when everything happened, specifically with Kate's Photoshop image, because I felt like she was completely thrown under the bus.
yep,
And then to find out what was actually going on,
yep,
um, and whether that was true or not, like her being the taking all of the blame for that
right.
felt gross and
It was
unnecessary.
reminiscent of Harry
it
and
it just
Meghan.
felt like validating what Harry was
Yeah,
saying about like the royal family refusing to protect the spouses. I also thought it was good that they shut up a little bit. Whenever someone gets too overexposed, I start, you know, it's like the constant, it is like, well, I never liked Travis Kelce, but like the more he talks, the more I'm reminded I don't like him.
Yeah, the more commercials I see him and his brother on,
it's just,
the less I
it's
want
like
to be
I'm just
involved.
waiting for his mom to say the next mean thing about him. That's like the only content I desire. But
or Taylor, she didn't say nice things about Taylor either.
Yeah, it's honestly, Donna, you're an icon. Even
I know.
I'm annoyed at you too for being in a
relationship.
Hallmark movie for Christmas. Like, but get your bag, I guess. I don't even remember what. Oh, Harry and Meghan is who I was talking about. Yeah. So I think it's good that they are taking a little moment. I also think that if they have another flop of an entertainment endeavor,
I know,
Mom Talk won't survive it. So I need,
for real this time.
I need them to figure it out. So just take your time. Wear
Make
your
it count.
cute little outfits around Southern California, going to your like exclusive bookstore opening. Keep me wondering how you're affording this new diamond necklace. Like
That's what I want to
content
see.
I want. It's
That's what I want to see.
mysterious.
Yes.
It's intimate.
Throw a little bit of charity in there and some travels to Africa. Like,
talk less, serve more.
Serve more. Let the photos and journalists do the talking for you.
Yeah. So that's where I'm at with them.
I'm glad to hear that there's a little bit of softening there.
There's softening. Like I said, you just got to stay out of my timeline.
Stay out of my mentions.
And then yes, just truly. I did feel extremely sad about the estrangement between brothers too.
It still
Kate's diagnosis became public, especially because
that was a lose-lose for Harry.
Be there for each other during that time. Yeah, I'm not putting that on Harry.
Oh, I know. I'm just like, it's sad because he couldn't do anything right in that situation. I'm sure he was hurting as well. So
yeah, and their dad's also sick.
Stop laughing.
It's just, why do we not talk about it?
Because they won't tell us what's going on, and I will refuse to talk about it until they tell us what he's actually going through. That's my stance.
Okay. All right. Well, once we know, I'm sure we'll be back with more details on that.
We'll be back. Or maybe we'll just forget because it's Charles. Until next time.
Terrible.